Today we're going to be looking at the Yabukita cultivar. Where does it come from? And why does understanding it matter when thinking about all of Japanese tea? Let's find out. Hi tea friends, this is Elsa with nannuoshan, where we share in the pleasure of drinking and discovering genuine farm teas. If you're new to our channel, if you're looking to expand your tea knowledge or your brewing skills, then please don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you like what you're seeing, please give us 2 thumbs up. So as I mentioned, we're going to be doing a Yabukita deep dive today. My original thought was to maybe compare 2 different cultivars, but then I realized that there's actually so much to talk about with Yabukita that it might be better to focus on that one first before starting to look at others. So if you have some in your kitchen somewhere, please go ahead and grab it and let's steep it together while we find out more. So chances are that a lot of you have probably already heard of the Yabukita cultivar, or if you haven't heard of it but you drink a lot of Japanese tea, chances are you've actually drank it. And that's because more than 75% of Japanese tea fields are made up of this cultivar nowadays. And actually in the region Shizuoka, which is where the Yabukita cultivar was first discovered, that percentage is even higher. So Shizuoka is actually a good tea region to keep in mind when you're thinking about Japanese teas. It's one of the 2 largest tea producing regions. So it's a prefecture located in the central island of Honshu, and along with Kagoshima, they're responsible for the most Japanese tea production. Now, whereas Japanese tea is primarily known for its mass production of tea due to the flat farming terrain, Shizuoka is known as much more of a specialty tea region. So that's both thanks to the climate, the soil, the fact that tea has been growing there for a very, very long time, and its location. It's really come to be known as the region that some of the most beautiful Japanese teas come from. In particular, you have areas such as Honyama, for example, which are really celebrated for premium teas. So, and Shizuoka is actually where our Yabukita cultivar was discovered. But before we get to that, what are cultivars? So cultivars are cultivated varieties which have been selected and officially identified for a number of reasons. So they have to go through a pretty complicated selection process, which can last years, let's say even 6 years. And during that time, the tea plant and then the tea which comes from that plant is analyzed upon a variety of different factors. So the tea that comes out of there is looked at for its astringency, umaminess, bitterness, what is the color of the liquor, what is the luster of the leaf like, really the appearance of the tea itself. And then once this cultivar has been identified as being particularly relevant or noteworthy for some reason, it's then categorized according to the 4 Japanese tea categories. So will this cultivar be particularly good for Sencha producers, for Gyokuro and Tensha producers, so Tensha being the tea production method which is used to make matcha? Will this cultivar be good for kamairicha, which is the Japanese tea which isn't steamed but pan-fired? Or will it be good for black tea? So then this cultivar is recommended for a particular tea production. And then farmers, when it's time for them to replant a tea field, take different factors into account. So what kind of tea am I making, but also what is my terrain like? What is my soil like? What is the climate in my region like? Am I hoping for a crop which will grow on this date or on that date? So they choose from, actually today, there's about, I want to say 62 officially recognized cultivars in Japan. So they choose from all of those. But so, Yabukita is the most widespread of these different cultivars. It was founded, or it was discovered by a man named Hikosaburo Suyama, who was born in 1857. Now, he was a man who was ahead of his time in a lot of different ways. He actually recognized that the way in which tea cultivation and production was happening at the time wasn't very efficient. And he also realized that actually it might make more sense for farmers to have the same kind of tea tree in their field so that they could harvest them at the same time and also have a more consistent flavor profile. So he dedicated pretty much his whole life to hunting around for noteworthy tea cultivars and cuttings. Now, he had also been the person who realized that actually you could have a particularly delicious tea tree, but then if you tried to plant from its seeds, this new tea tree didn't retain the characteristics of its parent tea tree. And so he actually set about trying to find, well, he invented basically the cutting method and realized that it wasn't about planting from seeds, but actually planting from cuttings or almost like branches from a great tea tree. So then he hunted around all over Japan. His travels even took him to Korea, looking for noteworthy cultivars. And one day he found himself in this bamboo grove that had a tea field to the north and to the south, and he took a cutting of both, and one of them happened to be Yabukita, which actually, the name Yabukita literally means to the north of the bamboo grove. So now, during his lifetime, the Yabukita cultivar wasn't actually recognized for being as extraordinary as it is, and it was only after his death it was only a couple of years after his death, I want to say in 1953 or something like that, that the Yabukita cultivar was actually officially selected as cultivar number 6. And so our hero actually died without having been celebrated for his tremendous contributions to the Japanese tea industry. He had actually been mocked by many of his contemporaries during his lifetime, but he is the reason that today Japanese tea farmers are able to know when their tea plants will flush and are able to organize their tea fields accordingly. So today, the Yabukita cultivar is really the benchmark cultivar. When we say that, oh, well, this other cultivar is particularly a speedy bloomer or a tardy bloomer, we're actually comparing it to when the cultivar of Yabukita flushes and when does this other one compare to it, with about a 10-day window of give and take. When we talk about a cultivar being particularly abundant or particularly scarce, once again, it's in comparison to the Yabukita. So what makes the Yabukita cultivar so noteworthy? Is it because it's the most delicious? Actually not, interestingly enough. It's because it's the most easy. It's easy to manage. It's relatively not temperamental. It grows well in different climates, so you can have it in the more northerly tea-growing regions of Japan, just like in the south. It's resistant to frost, it's resistant to different bugs, and it also has this sort of, shall we say, average tea taste, which has since then become synonymous with the taste of Japanese teas. It's familiar, it's comfortable, and so really for people who are for producers who are focused on mass production, it's great to rely on this classic tea taste. And then for farmers who aren't really looking for revolution in their tea, but they're looking for reliability, they're able to turn to this cultivar, which does have an abundant, familiar, delicious flavor profile. And actually, the Yabukita cultivar has enabled the Japanese tea industry to have reliable, delicious tea output year after year after year. And that's pretty fabulous, right? That's worth celebrating. So without further ado, I suggest that we taste some Yabukita Cultivar and let's see what the fuss is all about. So if you have some at home, please please do grab some, and we can kind of compare, see what kind of flavor notes we find. So as a reminder, with Japanese tea is very, very sensitive, and so you definitely don't want to be using boiling water. And actually, you probably want to be using water that's around 70 degrees. Interesting to note that if you like your tea a little bit more astringent, then you can go towards, with the Sencha, you could go up to about even 80 degrees with your water. But if you like your tea much sweeter, if you use a little bit lower water temperature, then those bitterness notes won't come out so much. So if you like your tea to have as much umami as possible, then I would recommend brewing your Japanese green teas at about 60, shall we say. So here we go. And, you know, I'm not someone who uses, I don't have a fancy water kettle that boils my water at 60 or at 70 or at 80, depending on the button that I press. And so a good trick which I learned in Japan, which I would recommend, is actually, if you're wondering what temperature your water is at, if you hold your container for if you can hold it for about 4 seconds without burning yourself, then you won't burn the tea leaves either, and it's a good temperature to start brewing. So, and I like to steep my tea for about maybe 40 seconds or so. If you're going with lower water temperatures for like a gyokuro, you will probably extend that duration. But just for a classic Yabukita Sencha, 40 seconds is about right. And I'll actually be very curious to hear in the chat box if there are certain Yabukita flavor notes that you're finding that you really enjoy or that you don't enjoy so much. Please do share with us what you find. I'm left-handed, so the the little handle on the right side isn't always ideal for me, but so here we are with really a beautiful green, almost, it does have this like little neon glow to it of the Yabukita cultivar. So let's see. Okay, my water was a little bit on the cooler end. I think we were probably in the 65 range. So mine isn't too astringent, although it is a Sencha, which is known for having some of those astringency and sometimes kind of bitter notes. I find so definite the classic cut grass flavor notes. It's making me think of like forest floor in a way. But it also feels very sunny, and I actually find also some like some pine needle notes, I would say. Maybe some broccoli, like definitely that vegetal green brightness to it. So I will keep steeping that here. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think of the Yabukita cultivar. And, you know, as we then start looking at at other cultivars which have been selected not for their classic averageness, but actually for their special aromas or flavor profiles, it's really interesting to have Yabukita in mind as what Japanese tea can taste like, what the average seeks to taste like, and then to be comparing it with, what more artisan tea farmers are trying to pull out of their teas. Maybe it's a bit more floral or a bit more milky or very intense in umami notes without requiring shading, which is an interesting other elements to tease out from other cultivars. So thank you so much for sharing Japanese tea with me today. As a reminder, if you haven't done it yet, please don't forget to subscribe and do give us a thumbs up. And we look forward to sharing tea with you again next time. Thank you. Bye for now.